Hello and good morning to everyone. In our first audio of sustainable development issues and challenges, we have covered what is sustainable development. Point 1 introduction, point 2 meaning of sustainability, development and sustainable development. Under this heading, we have covered critics of growth model, industrialization, urbanization, inequities, and resource utilizations. In this UPSC General Study series, we will cover point number 3, origins of sustainable development, definitions of sustainable development, dimensions and concepts under this, sustainable and non-sustainable activities, and at the last, summary. After that, we will begin Unit 2, parameters of sustainable development. Now we are doing the number 3, origins of sustainable development. The origins of concept of sustainable development can be traced back to the 1960s when the writer and scientist Rachel Carson published her book The Silent Spring 1962. This book drew public attention to the destruction of wildlife by the use of pesticide DDT, dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane. This work was a turning point in the understanding of the interconnections among the environment, the economy, and social well-being. Gradually, in this period, the fear of global environmental limits began to emerge. Soon after, the animal population biologist Paul Ehrlich published the book Population Bomb 1968 on the connection between human population, resource exploitation, and the environment. In 1969, a non-profit organization, Friends of the Earth, was formed which was dedicated to protecting the environment from degradation and empowering citizens to have a voice in decision making. The governments of the northern countries began to recognize that the process of industrial development was damaging the environment. For example, the Swedish government had been concerned about the damage caused to their lakes by acid rain. This rain was a result of excessive pollution caused by the neighboring industrialized states. In 1971, the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Council, enacted a polluter pays principle where it said that those countries causing pollution should pay the costs. The report Limits of Growth The report Limits to Growth 1972, published by a group of young scientists, Club of Rome, from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, immediately took the world by storm, gaining enormous media coverage. It predicted dire consequences if growth was not slowed down. The United Nations Conference on Human Environment, even CHE, United Nations Conference on Human Environment, was organized in Stockholm 1972. For the first time, the idea that the environment was a critical development issue was placed on the international agenda. It led to the establishment of United Nations Environment Program (UNEP). The first director of UNEP, Maurice Strong, coined the term eco-development, which integrated development with environment protection. Since then, many milestones have marked the journey towards sustainable development. The concept of sustainable society emerged at a study conference on science and technology for human development, convened convened, convened by World Council of Churches 1974. Interestingly, the concept did not deal with environmental conditions but started with the principle principle of equitable distribution, which subsequently became the cornerstone of the Brundtland Report in 1987. Sustainable society also involved the concept of democratic participation, which became important nearly 20 years later at the Rio Earth Summit 1992. Yet another term, sustainable development, emerged in the World Conservation Strategy (WCS) 1980, published by the International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources (IUCN). Nature, Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources (IUCN), by two scholars, Eva Balfour, a soil scientist, and Beck Jackson, a geneticist, from the International Institute for Environment and Development (IIED). During UN Conference on Environment and Development (UNCD) in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro, the broadened term broadened up into a full concept of development, bringing together government and non-government organizations, NGOs, industrialists, scientists, community groups, and grassroots organizations. It became one of the most important interdisciplinary concepts that swept through studies on environment, economics, sociology, political science, life sciences, and gender. By 2000, the concept of sustainable development became formally settled as a guiding document in all international organizations. Since then, even member states have been publishing reports on the national status of sustainable development programs and strategies and submitting them to the specially created event body called Event Commission for Sustainable Development (CSD). The term is modified for different user groups as sustainable human development, sustainable economic growth, sustainable socio-economic development, and sustainable local governance. And very recently, in 2004, Information Communication Technology (ICT) for Sustainable Development. Point number 4, definitions of sustainable development, dimensions and concepts. Sustainable development was defined in the World Conservation Strategy Report as the integration of conservation and development to ensure that modifications to the planet do indeed secure the survival and well-being of all people. Development was defined as the modification of the biosphere and the application of human, financial, living and non-living resources to satisfy human needs and improve the quality of human life. Development could prove to be a threat unless resources were conserved, and so conservation of resources was defined in the report as the management of human use of the biosphere so that it may yield the greatest sustainable benefit to present generations while maintaining the potential to meet the needs and aspirations of future generations. This phrase attracted attention in the Brundtland Report. The Brundtland Report in 1983, the United Nations General Assembly set up the World Commission on Environment and Development (WCED) with the Norwegian Prime Minister Mrs. Gro Harlem Brundtland as the chairperson. The Commission's report was published as Our Common Future 1987. The definition of sustainable development given in this report contains within itself two key concepts. Number one, the concept of needs, in particular, the essential needs of the world's poor to which priority should be given. Number two, the idea of limitations imposed by the state of technology and social organizations on the environment's ability to meet present and future needs. The report emphasized that sustainable development is a matter of social equity within a generation, intragenerational, and between generations, intergenerational. The Commission stressed the importance of integration of environmental decisions into central economic decision making. It argued that a healthy environment was not possible in a world marked by extreme poverty, which forced people to practice environmentally destructive activities for short term survival. Therefore, it broadly stressed on economic growth. The Brundtland Report was widely accepted as it was released at a time when a large ozone hole was discovered over Antarctica 1985 and the Chernobyl Chernobyl nuclear accident occurred in 1986 that spread radioactive nuclear fallout across Europe. The Earth Summit, the direct consequence of the Brundtland Commission's report, was the event CED held in Rio de Janeiro, popularly known as the Earth Summit. It was declared in this conference that the right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet developmental and environmental needs of present and future generations. The results of the conference were the following documents. Number 1, the Framework Convention in Climate Change. Number 2, the Convention of Biological Diversity. Number 3, the Statement on Forest Principles. Number 4, the Rio Declaration. Number 5, Agenda 21, the Framework Convention on Climate Change (FCCC). The framework dealt with the limits on the use of fossil fuels. It was inspired by the success of reaching an agreement of the Montreal Protocol to reduce ozone depleting CFCs. The framework accepted that climate change due to greenhouse gases was a serious problem. It said that industrialized countries should take the lead to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions to 1990 levels by 2000, while there was no target for southern countries. The Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) it affirmed that countries have sovereign rights over biological resources in their territory, which should be shared internationally on mutually agreed terms. The terms included recognition of indigenous knowledge as intellectual property, the Statement on Forest Principles. Countries with tropical forests regarded the international intervention on their forests as intolerable. So this document was brought out which emphasized national sovereignty over forest. The Rio Declaration. This declaration had 27 principles. They emphasized development, national sovereignty over natural resources, and cooperation between states. Scientific and technological innovations and environmental protection were the other issues that were highlighted. Agenda 21. It is a document consisting of 500 pages. It has a bottom up approach and emphasizes the role and participation of citizens, especially women, communities, and NGOs, instead of large state and governmental institutions and projects. The role of market, trade, and business in bringing out sustainable development is emphasized. Agenda 21 also brings out the importance of knowledge creating institutions. The implementation of Agenda 21 is overseen by the CSD, which meets annually for 3 weeks in New York. The World Summit on Sustainable Development (WSSD). After 10 years of even CD, even CED, the World Summit on Sustainable Development took place in Johannesburg in 2002. This summit is also called Rio plus 10 countries were urged to stop overfishing by 2015 and a new commitment to establish marine protected marine protected areas by 2012 was made. An agreement to significantly reduce the rate of loss of biodiversity by 2010 was also made. 4.1 Sustainable and non-sustainable activities. The concept of sustainable development is not just about the environment but about the economy and our society as well. Sustainability is a concept which deals with mankind's impact through development on the environment. Today's environmental problems are largely the consequence of the unsustainable consumption of natural resources and the mismanagement of waste products. Sustainability is about environmental protection, sustained economic growth, and social equity. Sustainable development focuses on improving the quality of life for all. It also offers different things to different persons, from sensitive environmentalists to liberal marketers. The concept has been interpreted and used to suit their needs. It is like the concept of democracy and justice, which are never contested but are interpreted to suit ideologically opposed groups. However, the baseline agreement, which is undebated in its meaning, can be given in a nutshell as sustainable activities are those which: number one, use materials in continuous cycles; number two, use reliable sources of energy contin- continuously; use the positive and just side of human personality; last, want growth to last longer without being slower. Activities are unsustainable when they: number one, overuse natural resources in a wasteful manner; number two, consumption is faster than renewable; number three, overkill life forms leading to the extinction of species; number four, cause cumulative degradation of the environment. In the last summary of all this chapter, sustainable development emerged as a concept in the early 60s when the ruthless industrialization in the developed countries started showing showing visible signs of natural degradation and problems of pollution and ill health. Sustainable development became a wholesome word after the Brundtland Commission report of 1987. It has three fundamental principles of intergenerational equity and justice, intragenerational equity and justice, and that of the respect for the carrying capacity of land. Since the definition given by the report fails to define the processes underlying the complexities and contradictions within which international decisions are taken, the industrialized and the less industrialized countries have defined the term to suit their own requirements. However, there is a basic value inherent in this concept which everyone agrees to, and that is the respect for human needs only in relation to the environmental capability to support the largest number of people to the longest possible time frame. Unit 2. Since we have completed Unit 1 with the summary of Unit 1 on sustainable development issues and challenges, now we are beginning Unit 2 parameters of sustainable development. The unit structure is number 1 introduction, number 2 concept of carrying capacity, number 3 intergeneration equity and justice, global, regional and country levels, number 4 intragenerational equity and justice, global, regional and country levels, number 5 gender disparity, number 6 diversity, social cultural knowledge bio, and at the last summary of the unit 2. Number 1 Introduction. Parameters of sustainable development refer to the guiding principles that number first help in understanding the concept of sustainable development, second point out the problems associated with it, and number third help to take active policy measures based on them. The parameters include carrying capacity, inter and intra-generational equity, gender disparity and diversity. Carrying capacity is defined as the number of individuals of a given species that can be sustained indefinitely in a given space. Carrying capacity of the earth means the ability of the earth to maintain human beings sustainably and indefinitely. Our way of life is directly affected by the carrying capacity of the earth. The needs of human beings may be divided into basic and optional. The basic human needs are air, water, food, clothing, and shelter that are supported by the earth. The optional needs offer the choice of a modern lifestyle and mainly comprise of material goods, energy, etc. The distribution of the resources to meet the basic and optional needs determines the carrying capacity of the earth. This distribution is largely unequal in today's world. This inequity can be attributed to many things including population, government policies, availability of resources, their processing, etc. This is discussed later. We influence the carrying capacity by destroying the forests, polluting the rivers, tapping energy sources indiscriminately, etc. The access to environmental resources therefore needs to be controlled as suggested by the Brundtland Report, which includes the need for social equity. This means that the access to the resources should be made equal among all. However, various issues like the expanding industrialization, globalization, and privatization throws back new challenges to the concept. Under this changed scenario, the concept is not just definable within the parameters of equity within generations, but between generations. We need to conserve and utilize the resources in such a way that the coming generations are not affected adversely. The importance of women in sustainable development was brought into the forefront in the Earth Summit. When the environment is disturbed, they are the first to notice, but they are the last to be consulted on this issue. The discrimination against women has been detrimental to the overall developmental process. At the grassroots level, the woman is at the pivot of the family. The responsibility of the well-being of the family rests with her. If she is neglected and discriminated, then the whole unit collapses. The diversity that exists in the societies, in the cultural or indigenous knowledge, and in the wildlife is extremely high. Management of this diversity is an enormous task. The useful utilization of the diversity within their niche would ensure sustainable development of these diverse societies. These fundamental parameters, which are indispensable for designing a sustainable development policy, are described and explained below. Number two, concept of carrying capacity. In ecology, the thumb rule is that of conserving interrelationships. Human activity that threatens the future existence of other species may be an ecological disaster since it would in turn affect other species also. These interrelationships are taken care of within the concept of carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is a concept which limits the potential ability of natural resources and species to withstand human intervention. It may be described as a test of the ability of land, water, and air to keep itself usable and toxicity free despite pollution and effluent discharges and harmful developments over it. The famous American wildlife conservation ecologist Aldo Leopold described carrying capacity in 1933 as a saturation point at which the numbers of a particular species of grazing animals approached the point where grasslands could support no more individuals without a general and continuing decline in the quality of the pasture land, while chemical fertilizers, insecticides, and pesticides increase crop yield, yet their use beyond the carrying capacity of land may destroy crops. This is equally true for the effluent discharges into rivers, ponds, and other wetlands. The wetlands sustain life forms and complete ecosystems, which in turn support larger ecosystems. Earth's carrying capacity is threatened by monoculture, cultivation of a single crop variety, pollution, overpopulation, overgrazing, deforestation, and urbanization. These activities may not be unsustainable in themselves, but the thin line that separates them from being beneficial to mankind and becoming harmful is the environmental recognition of the concept of carrying capacity. If taken beyond carrying capacity, the activities may prove disastrous. Carrying capacity also refers to the number of individuals who can be supported in a given area within the limits of natural resources and without degrading the social, cultural, and economic environment for the present and future generations. The carrying capacity for any given area is not fixed. It can be extended to a certain level by improved technology, but mostly it is changed for the worse by pressures which accompany a population increase. As the environment is degraded, carrying capacity actually shrinks, leaving the environment with no ability to support even the number of people who could formerly have lived in the area on a sustainable basis. No population can live beyond the environment's carrying capacity for very long. The average citizen's ecological footprint is assessed by the demands an individual endowed with average amounts of resources like land, water, food, fiber, waste assimilation, and disposal puts on the environment. While for a citizen in a development country, the land requirements ranges from about 10 to 12 acres, which is an area far greater than the than that taken up by one's residence and place of school or work and other places where he or she is in those countries. for its citizen in a developing country, it is from less than 1 acre in a sub-Saharan country to around 3 acres in India. A common fallacy is to believe that a rich country can retain the carrying capacity of its resources in maintaining the standards of their living by transferring these pressures through transnational businesses to poorer countries. Since everything is related to everything else, ecological destruction in one country manifests in the form of economic impulsions in other countries. The policy formulators have to think in terms of carrying capacity and not land area. For example, effects of unfettered population growth drastically reduce the carrying capacity in the United States US as the unregulated businesses do in India. Number 3, intergeneration equity and justice, global, regional and country levels. Inter Intergenerational equity refers to the use of Earth's resources between generations in a manner that the present generation does not consume it completely to its exhaustion. To its exhaustion. Equity is the foundation of sustainability, which means fairness and justice to all. It explores whether all people have similar rights, opportunities, and access to all forms of community capital. Intergenerational equity has to do with fairness between current and future members of a community. It does not mean that we neglect our current needs, but that we try to achieve a reasonable balance between satisfying our needs now and setting aside enough to provide for needs of the future. The consumerist world generates unsustainable lifestyles. People and nations are not careful about the use of natural resources and disposal of waste. Thus, our future generations are likely to have a poorer and more polluted world to live in. Aiming for intergenerational equity means that the policies have to give equal consideration to our immediate needs, our future needs, and the needs of those who would inhabit the world after us. Intergenerational equity has become integral to international law dealing with environmental protection, res- resource utilization, and socio-economic development. It contains elements which have intertemporal implications regarding the utilization of resources. The fairness in the utilization of resources between human generations, present and future, also requires that a balance be attained between meeting the consumptive demands of existing societies and ensuring that adequate resources are available for future generations. The intertemporal aspect of resource distribution and consumption has become an increasingly important issue, especially in view of growing threats of environmental degradation and resource depletion arising out of current consumption patterns and technological advances. A telling example of neglect of intergenerational equity consideration is that of a small island state in the Pacific, Nauru, which is a close neighbor of big countries like Australia and New Zealand. Nauru had rich phosphates in its soil but could not use it due to lack of knowledge and technology. Australian soil lacked phosphates and due to that its agricultural output was poor. Australian miners signed agreements with the Nauru government in the decade of 70s, which readily agreed to welcome trade expansion with the rich country. For around a decade, the citizens of Nauru got bumper employment, and their generation achieved standards of Western lifestyles. Once the mines extracted all phosphates out of their soil, they left, leaving behind a rich electronically studied country and have equipments but no money and employment to move ahead or even maintain their acquired lifestyles. Citizens took to drugs and the mafia ruled. Intergenerational equity is included in the substantive part of Article 3 of the Climate Change Convention (CCC). It states that parties should protect the climate system for the benefit of present and future generations of humankind on the basis of equity and in accordance with their common but differentiated responsibilities. However, the lacuna is that the statements do not tell how this is to be done. What changes in lifestyles and behavior different from what presently prevails are required to protect the interests of future generations. No legally binding international instruments suggest how the interests of future generations should be considered or how the interests of future generations may differ from those of present generations with regard to access and utilization of natural resources. A framework for addressing protection of interests of future generations through tripartite principles may be that of conservation of options, conservation of quality, and conservation of access. This requires a thorough reorientation of legal structures which currently encourage unsustainable resource conversion. Thus, intergenerational equity is an ethical principle that restrains the greed of the present generation and suggests long-term assessment of natural resources in framing commercial and trade policies. Point number 4: Intragenerational equity and justice, global, regional, and country levels. We will cover it in our next audio. That is audio number 4.